So, with virtually no news out at the moment surrounding Doctor Who, whether it be rumours about this year's Xmas special or the next series, a lot of people are asking what exactly does lie ahead for everyone's favourite Time Lord. The war between the land and the sea wrapped up at the end of last year, which brought the so-called Disney era of Who to a close, though in that sense I wouldn't call it as much of an era as we've had in the past. However, the lack of news surrounding Doctor Who's future has led to a lot of speculation, rumours and some potential leaks over what comes next, so I wanted to take some time to discuss the future of Doctor Who. Now, it's being said currently that Russell T Davies is returning to write the upcoming festive special, and rumours are also suggesting that after this episode airs, he and possibly Bad Wolf Studios will be departing the show, which leaves room for a new creative team to take the reins. In regards to production, I think it's possible that the BBC could produce the show in-house like they have done before, but if Who is going to survive, at least for a few more years, I don't want it going anywhere, then I think a co-production partner will be key to helping the show continue. One idea I've seen is letting HBO perhaps help finance the show, and they have had the streaming rights before, so I imagine a deal like that could work fairly well. Moving on to talking about a potential showrunner, this is actually something I've talked about before in a few videos. One of my choices to potentially helm the show was Kate Herron, who wrote the Regency episode from season 1, and of course ran Marvel's Loki for its 2 seasons. However, some rumours have also suggested that the BBC are looking for someone who hasn't worked on Doctor Who before to actually helm it and take on the role. Some other suggestions could include the likes of Charlie Brooker, who's best known for creating Black Mirror over at Netflix, which I could definitely see working, whilst another suggestion is J. Michael Straczynski, best known for creating Babylon 5, and has actually expressed interest in either writing for the show or taking on the mantle that Russell is seemingly going to be leaving behind. Now, another thing I think that we do need for the next era of Doctor Who is a clean slate. A new Doctor, a new TARDIS, a new companion, basically completely new everything. Now, of course, as we do know, when a new showrunner does take over, this normally ends up being the case. But this time we need to go all out with getting these 3 aspects right. Get a well-known actor to play the Doctor, get a fan-favourite choice for the companion, and a TARDIS interior that has a lasting appeal. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love all the modern interiors. The 2005 to 2010 one was my favourite. But I think we need to go back to something a bit more minimalistic. The classic console rooms, for example, did this very well. It's actually why I love the War Doctor's console room a lot more. It was very simple in design and helped to bridge together the classic and modern versions of the console room design, in a similar manner to what the Dark Eyes look did for the 8th Doctor. I also think that the new TARDIS design needs to depend on what genre the next showrunner is going to lean towards, whether it be a more gothic look, something steampunk inspired, or something else entirely. But I think this clean slate also extends to the stories as well. You can have the classic villains show up, but do it in a way that introduces audiences to them for the first time. Now, Doctor Who has of course had a lot of very memorable writers over the years, many of them being well known and others not so much. With that said, I think if we're headed for a near complete reset after Russell's final special this year, I think a great idea would be to welcome some writers who perhaps haven't worked on Who before. I mentioned earlier about J. Michael Straczynski and how he was pretty eager about wanting to work on the show. Alongside that, Charlie Brooker I think could do some really weird horror stuff with the show, and I'd even be up for seeing what Phoebe Waller-Bridge could do with an episode or two, because she has actually written the upcoming Tomb Raider show for Amazon Prime that is starring Sophie Turner, and by all means that looks really good, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like and how that's going to play out. Anyway, I also think it would be worth looking at writers who perhaps contributed to only one story and then didn't come back. Some examples could include Robert Shearman, who wrote the new series' first Dalek episode, and then there's Richard Curtis, who wrote Vincent and the Doctor, which was a truly fantastic episode by all accounts. So a mix of new writers that haven't worked on the show before and others who perhaps didn't get a chance to come back would work, in my opinion, very well. Now, when it comes to the actual format of the series, Doctor Who has varied quite a bit, especially since 2005. Series 1 through 4, or excluding any Christmas specials, all featured 13 episodes each. This then carried over into Moffat's run, as Series 5, 6 and 7 also went to that count of stories, again not counting festive episodes, though in the cases of both Series 6 and Series 7 they were split into 2 parts. Capaldi's run was brought down to 12 episodes per series, and come Jodie's run we were down to just 10 episodes for both Series 11 and 12. Come 2021, however, the original classic series formula was reworked to give us Doctor Who Flux, on account of some real-world circumstances. But times have indeed changed since 2005, audiences have grown and television has had to adapt with it. Some fans have suggested perhaps moving Who to a 30-minute format per episode, something that the Sarah Jane Adventures actually did as well. Something like this would allow for hopefully a decent amount of episodes, ideally 8 through 10, and then having a series arc span across that with 1 or 2 filler episodes in there as well. And a way to make this format work, in my opinion, lies with Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Whilst the series did tell its own story in the build up to what we eventually saw happen in Revenge of the Sith, we got several arcs throughout that show. Among these we had the Mortis arc, Maul's return and then him eventually going on to rule Mandalore, the Bad Batch, and finally the Siege of Mandalore from the final season. Now, my point with this is that Doctor Who's next team of writers could theoretically build on the idea established by George Lucas and Dave Filoni, frame the serials as arcs rather than actual serials, and have them build up towards something without being too obviously season-long arcs. You can have one story span across a couple episodes and then continue on for a bit, then have another arc span across another few episodes. Something like that I feel could work really well, considering that these days the sci-fi genre is certainly more varied. Now, another thing that the Disney era of Who lacked was classic villains. Whilst we did get more godlike foes in the finales like Sutekh and Omega, as well as the return of the Rani, who wasn't really godlike but still counts, I'm talking about seeing more villains return. Now, in all honesty, one thing that actually surprised me with the Disney era is that they didn't push for Russell to include more classic villains like the Daleks or the Cybermen, both of whom are arguably some of the most iconic monsters from the show's 60-plus year history. Whilst there are some unconfirmed rumours currently that the Daleks are going to be returning at Christmas, I think this hiatus they've been on really does need to end, because in my opinion it has hurt the show quite a bit. The Cybermen also, in my opinion, need a refresh as well. One idea I quite like is perhaps reutilising the Cyber Commander design from the Dark Dimension story from the 90s, and having the Doctor and their companion fighting a group of those versions of the character. Regarding some other monsters, I'd quite like to see the Zygons come back, seeing as they haven't been present in the show since Capaldi's second season. If we want to bring back some Renegade Time Lords again, then we could bring back the Monk and bring him into the modern run of the show, and if that happens, then get Matt Merry to play him, because I know that casting would go down quite well. And also, I think we do need a definitive answer over what happened to the Master, because we still haven't gotten an answer to that yet. We might get it at Christmas, but if not, do it in the next series, whichever one works best. So this next one is something that has been up for debate quite a lot since the airing of the Reality War last year. Well, the first question being asked was whether or not Billie Piper was indeed playing the next Doctor. Despite her scenes being filmed last minute, I think Billie is intended to be playing the next incarnation of the character. Now, it is looking more likely, at least in my eyes, that Billie isn't sticking around and will definitely regenerate in the next special. Russell says he has a quote-unquote clear idea in mind for what's going to happen, take that as you will, so I hope he'll do a great job this time around. Now, in my opinion, when it comes to Russell's strongest episodes, some of those actually lie with the festive season. The Christmas Invasion, Runaway Bride, Voyage of the Damned, The Next Doctor, and The End of Time were all superb and, in my opinion, written very well. Even the Church on Ruby Road from 2023 was, in my opinion, quite enjoyable. But that then brings us to the question of who's actually going to be the next Doctor. Well, that's a whole other question in of itself. Now, I suspect the BBC are going to keep the actor a secret until the airing of the next special, or maybe keep the regeneration open-ended, so that whoever will be running the show next can start off with a clean slate and choose the next Doctor themselves without having to be stuck with an actor that they didn't choose. As for who could play the next Doctor, that's also up for some debate and definitely something worth exploring in a video of its own. Now, the next companion is also something that, much like whoever's going to play the new Doctor, will also be up for some debate. Now, one thing I do want to discuss first is what period would the companion be from. We've seen in the past that companions from either modern day Earth or at some point in its past/future actually does very well, but there are normally loads of variables involved, such as who the Doctor is, what time period the companion is from, and whether they're even human at all. Some have ended up being aliens in some capacity. If we want to differentiate the next companion slightly or massively, one idea that could work is having the Doctor's next travelling partner be from the very far future. It would already show us that the companion is familiar with the futuristic tech that awaits the human race, which could in theory make the Doctor the audience surrogate, which would be an interesting dynamic. But with that said, I think there's a certain long-lasting appeal with companions being from modern-day Earth. The audience surrogate is in some way meant to act as our pathway into the world of a TV show. And having the companion be from modern-day Earth I think helps relate the audience to the secondary characters, though then again the role of the audience surrogate isn't as straightforward as it was 20 years ago, so that rule can be bent here and there in some cases. Okay, so going back to my format discussion from earlier, another idea that could work is perhaps using Torchwood as a basis. Now that may seem pretty vague at first, so let me explain. Now, Torchwood, much like Doctor Who, has used the standard 13-episode format, but when it came to the third series, Russell actually took a different approach. Instead of 13 episodes, he scaled the series down to a 5-episode arc, spanning across one series, with each episode being roughly an hour or so in length. That sounds very similar, in my mind at least, to what Chris Chibnall ended up doing with Flux. If this format from Children of Earth was adopted, then the stories would still be at roughly an hour or so in length, though there would be a smaller count of episodes. But when you do watch Children of Earth and pay attention to the story, it does work very well. All it would take, theoretically, is for the right showrunner and creative team to make it happen.